All right. We're gonna go from the zoomed out world view, right? And we're gonna start bringing it in and zooming into that street view so we can kind of see how to navigate a classroom successfully. So in this session, we're going to learn how to reveal the Father's heart through setting up a classroom environment that is both nurturing, rewarding, and establishes boundaries, safety, and order. So you don't need to just pick one. We can do both. We can do it. You can do it. All right. So in my classroom, you can go to the next slide. Oh, by the way, I'll be taking questions at the end, but I was just kind of experimenting with this. If at any point, if you want to go back one, sorry. If at any point you want to submit a question, like anonymously, you can submit one, do the same, go to Slido, same code, and then it'll submit you'll be able to submit a question, I think. It should work. And you can go to the next slide. This is Rita Pearson. If you've never watched her TED Talk on kids, I would highly recommend it. Kids don't learn from people they don't like. Now, this is feel her heart in this. You can learn from someone you don't like and bond with, but how much easier is it if you have bonded with, is that sounds? Is that the, okay. I thought it was coming. You guys told me about how the sound goes through. That's funny. So, on day one of my class, at the beginning of the school year, a lot of teachers like to have, get the kids started right away with work. Some teachers like to start with rules and procedures right away. I don't do any of that. I play with them. Day one in my classroom, I'm like, guys, here's what you need to know about Mr. Goodman. I want a kind, peaceful classroom. I start feeding him my little mantras. One of my mantras is, if you work hard, we play hard. That's what we're going to do. But today, we're flipping that, and we're going to play hard. And so I get out all my good things. I show them, just like the Father showed us his goodness to Adam and Eve first. He showed his goodness to Moses, or to the children of Israel. Jesus showed his goodness to people as he walked the earth. I show my goodness to my students. I said, all right, you can play on my iPads. You can play Beyblade. You can play Legos. I'll play board games with you. Let's have fun. And so I get out every good thing in my classroom, and we sit down, and we play, and we talk. And if there's any little problems, which there usually isn't, they're just usually delighted to play with in school. I just give little steering instructions there that first day, and we bond, and we have fun together, and we develop trust. And then they know you're good, and you have their best interests out for them, right? And in our children's church, that's what we do. We have the kids come in, and I think Kayla has started this here at Harvest, as the kids come in a little bit early, and we have a bunch of different games out, and drawing, and coloring, and all this stuff. And we sit and play with the kids. And so that's a priority. And then the next thing we do is we lay out the reward. So next slide. So I lay out the rewards in front of them, right? Because love is a choice. So I lay out the choices, and I say, you can take whichever path you want. It doesn't bother me. You can take the path to the treasure and the rewards and all the good things, or you can take the path to sadness. So I say, when I introduce myself, I go up front. I say, hey, I'm Mr. Paul. I'm so glad you're here today. For those of you who are new, or even if there's no one new there, I still go over my rules anyway, so they memorize them by now. But I show them a prize box first. I say, here's my prize box, and here's all my rewards. I have Chinese finger torture devices in there, you know, those ones that you put your fingers in, they get stuck, and I have yo-yos, and I have Legos and candy, and I display all the goodies to them, and I say, I want you to get these rewards, and let me tell you how you're going to get them. And so I say, in our church we use raffle tickets, which Kayla has also started using, and so that way we can give out many raffle tickets and reinforce behavior as we see it, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But I tell them, let me rewind a second. About every month, I get their input on what goes into the prize box. And children are people too, and all people like to have some sense of control, and that's okay. And so we give children some control by saying, what would you like in the prize box? And they're like, I want gummy worms, and I want Legos, and you know, some kids ask for Nintendo Switches, and I'm like, oh, that's a little rich for my blood, kid. But let's bring it down. Like, think dollar store here, you know, think the Dollar's General, and so they're like, you know, Twix, and so I try to best I can to keep that supplied up, and so then they have buy-in, right? They have helped create this system. They have buy-in. They have some control. So then their ability to respond goes up. They're interested now because they have a little bit of control and input into it. They have buy-in. Buy-in increases the good behavior that you're after. Okay? Then C, so once you've laid out the reward, you tell them how they earn the reward, right? So I say, this is how you earn these prizes. In our children's church, Kids in the Kingdom, you need tickets. The more tickets you get, the more likely you are to get a prize, because at the end of the time, it's the raffle tickets that you split apart, and they have, you know, with the matching numbers. And so I'll set a ticket timer. I have a 2-minute ticket timer going on the screen, which if they don't get quiet quickly or something, I'll say, oh, I got to reduce the ticket timer by 15 seconds now. You know, you guys wasted our learning time, so I have to waste some of your ticket timer time. So that gets them pretty good. But so I set the ticket timer, and I start reading tickets off. And, of course, the more they were following my rules, the more tickets they got, the more likely they are to get a prize. So that's what we do. I've tried different things through the years, and that might change, but that's what we're doing right now. So I tell them how to earn the reward. So that's when I lay out the expectations. If you go to the next slide. Expectations can be very simple, such as be kind, be safe, and be respectful. That does not need to be long. Actually, you should not have more than like 4 or 5 things on your list. It's too much for kids to remember. Kayla here uses that you sit on your pockets, that you raise your hand to participate or have a question, and she uses what the public schools use around here, kafudi. Keep your hands, feet, and all of their objects to yourself, what happened to be our school's little motto that they said over the speaker every single morning. So that's funny that you guys use that here. But so that's a very good one. And so as long as it's like you'll earn tickets as long as you're following our 3 little rules, right? And you might demonstrate right then. You have the opportunity. I bought myself a roll of fake dollar bills, which I just had in my school. So I'm going to demonstrate here something here in a minute. From far away, it kind of looks kind of real, right? If I move it quickly. So in our children's church, I say, all right, touch your ear. Okay, I want you to be a good listener. And then I say, point to your pockets, meaning the pockets on their bottom, to avoid saying the word but, which will elicit giggles. So we say pockets. So you need to stay seated on your pockets. And then we raise our hand. So I have them like follow after me. And if you want to you have a question or want to participate. And so then right then I go up to someone and I'll say, oh man, you, Tasha, are being a great listener right now. I see you looking at me and you're paying attention and you're on your pockets. Great job being a great listener. So right then I reinforce my rules right off the bat and reward them. And then, all the other kids tighten up, Then I establish the quiet signal. You can go to the next slide. Different places use different things. Some places say, give me 5, and they hold up their hand, and the 5, or mouths are quiet, hands are up, freeze in place, eyes on teacher, ears open. And so they just raise their hand. To me, I'm not a huge fan of that one because if kids are engaged doing something, it's like, how long are you going to stand there and wait? I'm not a huge fan of that one. Some people use the quiet signal. I like ones that our kids can see them and hear them. I like the hearing ones. You want to use a quiet signal that's not overly annoying. Excuse me. After you used it 15 times in one day, and you want to practice with them so that they're quiet, but after 3 to 5 seconds. If they're not quiet in 3 to 5 seconds, you have to retrain. So, for example, I use class, and they respond yes, yes. So let's just practice that real quick, just for demonstration purposes. So when I say class, you guys are going to say yes, yes. Class. Oh, that was great. You did a great job. So I saw some people get quiet right here, and Gary got quiet right away. Oh, and Kayla's quiet right away, and she's sitting on her pockets. Man, that is a great job, right? And so if they don't respond and they're not quiet right away, you're like, oh, I still heard some voices. Let's try that again. Class. Oh, okay, that's much better, right? And so you don't want to let it go. Don't let them trail off and take 15 seconds because then they're going to expect you to say it repeatedly, right? And the expectation is okay, now once their voice raises, then that's when I need to listen. No. Our expectation is, we have expectations. They're clear. You need to respond within quickly, right? So we set that up from the beginning. Quiet signal. Kayla uses 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, and the kids say, 1, 2, eyes on you. So that's a great one. I like that one. So I already started using my tokens here with you all. I apologize. I was on the way here, and I was going to give you options to pick from at the end to buy things, but I was so focused on my Google Maps that I passed by all the stores to make sure I got here, and so darn, I didn't. Next time, guys, next time. I was going to buy some candy and that you can buy them with your dollars, but darn. So let me teach you about pairing tokens, and a token is anything you decide to use that represents praise for positive behavior. It could be fake money like this. It can be stickers. It can be little craft Hobby Lobby pom-pom little fluffy ball things. It can be whatever you want to use as your token. And this comes into play with, remember how in the last session I talked about it, I started identifying these little baby steps that the kids were taking and praising it. You know, they went from fist fighting to cussing at each other, and I praise them for that. It takes you, when the behavior is that severe, it takes you to train your mind to identify positive behavior. The way I do that is I would take tokens and put them in my pocket, and I would make a goal. I'm going to get rid of these tokens. I'm going to give them away in the next hour or the next 15 minutes. And so then I'm training my mind to identify positive behavior. The reason why it's so difficult for us as adults to identify and praise positive behavior is because it's reinforcing to us adults to have positive behavior happen because we're not annoyed, right? So it's easier if a child's annoying us and showing negative behavior, then we're like, oh, we're all over that because we're annoyed, right? It's negatively affecting us. But positive behavior we overlook because we're just like, oh, peace, this is nice. And we ignore the positive behavior, but we miss an opportunity to praise it and see the positive behavior increase, okay? So let me tell you this story. When I was in 3rd grade, I lived in New Jersey, and I went to Taylor Mill School. It had a sweet playground. It had like this tire playground that was made out of like monster truck tires. It was insane. Maybe they weren't monster truck. You know, I don't know. They were big. And anyway, it was a cool school. I had a 3rd grade teacher. No joke. Her name was Mrs. Magnifico. She was this Italian former nun. And I loved her. She was awesome. She was strict, yet loving. Maybe that's why I loved her. She was both sides of love. And that was the year I did, like, I remember making, like, a dinosaur scene. What's those things called? Dinosaur diorama, and, like, this cloud project with cotton balls. It was great. 3rd grade was a great year for me. But so I remember one day we would do, you know, birthday parties like other classrooms do, and a kid brought in like the little Hostess cupcakes, you know, with the flat layer of frosting with the little white swirls on the top, you know, and I remember eating it at my desk, and then I cleaned up after myself. I cleaned the crumbs, and I brushed them into my hand, and I was getting ready to stand up and bring the crumbs to the trash can. Mrs. Magnifico stopped, and she was like, "Class, look at Paul here. He brushed the crumbs up so neatly, and he brushed them into his hand, and he just cleaned up so nicely." And I was like, yes, I did. And I tell you what, that's the exact way I clean up my table after I eat to this day. And that is the power of praise, specific praise statements. Now, notice she didn't say, "Good job." She did not say that. She told me exactly what I did right. Okay? And this is key. Because she could have said, "Good job," and then I was like, "Okay, good job that I got up out of my seat." Right? Not very specific. But she was like, "He brushed it into his hand and then was so careful with it and then threw it in the trash." She told me all the steps that I did right. She praised me with it, and I carried that through. That impacted me so much that I'm now 39 years old. It's like 31 years later. I still remember that moment of praise. And so when you pair tokens with specific praise statements, right? It's like, "I appreciate you so much. You are looking at me right now, and you're in your seat, and I can tell you're listening," right? That's super powerful. Whatever you praise, that behavior is going to continue, okay? And other kids are going to keep going on that path, right? Kids want praise. They'll vie for praise even if there's no tokens attached to it. So when you attach it to tokens, it's doubly or quadruple the power. I don't know. I haven't scientifically figured that out yet. Let's go with quadruple because it sounds better. But so some examples of specific praise might be, I noticed how when I said cleanup time, that you immediately stood up and began putting the toys away. Wow. Right? As opposed to some of the lollygaggers that were like still playing, right? You praised, oh, you got up right away. What a great listener. You started putting things away. I noticed that you raised your hand and waited for me to call on you before you spoke. Great job. So you want to pair specific verbal praise with whatever token you want to hand out. I would say token economies work well for ages 5 and up. Ages 4 and down, their minds aren't quite developed enough yet to understand saving something up for delayed gratification. It just doesn't work very effectively. So for kids 4 and down, like using a sticker, the sticker itself is reinforcing, so that's pretty good. Using a treat or maybe they're earning some sort of little tiny toy or something like that so that you're able to randomly hand it out. I like catching kids doing the right behavior, right? I like catching them and giving them praise and giving a token and rewarding that behavior while they're in the process. There's so many things that happen in them and in the kids around them when you're able to catch them in the act of positive behavior. Like I said, that website Class Dojo is a great resource to use for digital tokens. You can even use it on your phone. So if you're a teacher of any sort, you can even if you're a parent, you can use that at home for your kids that are 5 and up. And you can create little things like a thumbs up symbol for on task, or you can create it. Whatever behavior you want to reinforce, you can label it in there. It's a really cool tool. Like I said, specific verbal praise is a learned skill. It's actually tough training yourself to see the positive behaviors. So like I said, put a certain amount of tokens in your pocket and then hand them out by the end, and you start training yourself to see the positive behaviors. So, giving you this is the meaty classroom management session that will quickly establish you as someone who is the adult in control of your environment. These are the types of things that people need when you have a new volunteer come in and they need these skills right away. You know, you just teach them. Here's the reward. This is how you do the rewards. Here's how you do the rules. Here's how you do the quiet signal. Here's how you do tokens. Boom, 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 boom. Suddenly, you go from being a novice to an expert in like that. Of course, it took me 15 years to figure this all out. So, so I had that picture up there earlier of the path, the fork in the road, right? So we've talked a lot about prizes, but some kids might want to take the path of sadness. There are some youngsters that want to walk that lonely road. And you have to have clear consequences, too. And we're not going for punishment. It's more like these are just natural consequences. This is what happens when you don't listen. You're going to miss out on tokens. You're going to make our ticket timer get lower. I usually don't like doing group consequences, though. I usually like to have individual consequences because if you do group consequences, it kind of punishes all the children, even the good ones, and it's very discouraging for them. My son is like a super achiever. Have you guys taken the Enneagram or Strengths Finders tests or anything like that? So my son is like, and very much like my wife. My wife's top one is achiever. My son's top one is like achiever. So he's like, he'll process his day with me, and he'll tell me about all the kids that broke the rules of the games. It's like, Dad, what's even the point of playing a game if you don't follow the rules? Because that makes the game. The rules make the game. He's like super passionate. And my wife's the same way, you know, like she was doing her bachelor's degree and she was like insisted on getting all straight A's. I saw like the top of her head over the laptop for like, 2 years straight. I'm like, hey honey, how are you? I'm like, okay, good. I'll just go make dinner now. It was better than that. I'm exaggerating. But, she was determined to get straight A's. And so, anyway, I don't even know where I was going with that. I was rambling. But, we need rules. We need consequences. We need natural consequences. Natural consequences are just like, oh man, you weren't listening, and so now I have to start my stopwatch timer, and that's how much, recess you're going to miss out on, or this is how much of playtime you'll have to miss out on instead of my think chair, and then we'll have to have a talk during that time about how you could handle that situation better next time, because we always want to train, right? The goal isn't to punish. The goal is to train the correct skill, right? And so in our children's church, we have a couple of think chairs at the side of the room. And I say, if you can't handle worship right now, or if you can't handle listening during this part of time, you'll have to sit in our think chair. And this is what I say at the beginning of our children's church session, and I say, if I have to ask you to sit in our think chair more than twice, it'll make me so sad, but you'll have to go back to your parents at that point, because ain't nobody got time for that. And so that's what we do, and some children take the path of sadness and end up back with their parents, but the next time, they behave better. Right? And the goal isn't to get them out. The goal is to have them there, right? We want them there. My heart is for them to be there. And I actually say, I want you to be here. I want to have fun with you. And it would make me so sad to have to send you back to your parents. But if you can't be in control of your body and follow my 3 rules, then you'll have to be in the think chair. And so it kind of works together. So there does need to be some natural consequences involved. Even though that's our goal for them is to take the path of righteousness, the path of treasure and rewards, right? That's the path we want them to go down. So we're going to go to the next section here, accommodating for common special needs. So my specialty is not necessarily teaching academics, but it is in developing and tweaking curriculum so it adapts for special needs, right? And levels the playing field. That's what I do professionally for a living. So I want to address some common things that are out there that you might have children that have these special needs. And so the first one is developmental delays. And it's when a child doesn't meet their developmental milestones at the expected times. And one way that we accommodate for that at our church is it's hard to train people on how to exactly deal with that behavior and keep them with their grade level, age level peers. So what we do, for example, we have a little girl, and she should be in the kindergarten class, but our area is very open for that. There's a couple of ways to exit, and the child needs to be able to be pretty independent to be in the area for 4 and up. For 3 and down, it's one door in and out. It's a half door, so it's like, and they have special things on the doorknobs and everything like that. And so when it was time for her, when she turned 4, and the mom brought her upstairs to our K4 class, where we start with that big playtime and the different toy stations, it was just very apparent that due to how much she was running around and trying to get into different areas, that it was just not an appropriate environment for her. So we just talked to the mom and said, we just feel like it would be more appropriate for your daughter to stay with the 3-year-old class longer. It's just going to be safer, and it's for the safety of the child, and more developmentally appropriate for her to stay in an environment that is 90% play, right? And so the mom was fine with that, and so we're able to handle that developmental delay in that manner, and that was a success. So if you see something in your classroom where you're like, oh man, this child does not act like the child, their peers, then that would be an option on how to make an accommodation for that. That's okay. Just have to communicate, right? Communicate in a positive way to parents. The other thing that you'll see is anxiety, right? Especially with kids that might be visitors or guests, and new environments can cause lots of anxiety for children. And so one way we work with that is we invite the parents to stay with us. We say, you are more than welcome to stay as long as you want to. For some parents, they are like, yeah, we'll do that. Some parents are like, nope, just rip the Band-Aid off. Just let them cry for 15 minutes, they'll be good. I'm like, okay, whatever you want. I'm not going to hold them here though. You know what I mean? I'm not going to physically restrain. In my job, where in the school district, I sometimes have to physically restrain kids, but that's part of my job, and we're trained for that. But at church, I don't do that. I'm not, if they want to run out, I'll be calling you, But, which I had to chase a child down the stairs once, and I'm like, someone come with me. And I'm make my way to the sanctuary, because we have kind of a big campus, and our sanctuary is separate, in a separate building than the children's church. So I'm like, oh my goodness. So I'm chasing this kid downstairs, and I'm telling mom, I don't think he's ready yet. That particular child had a pretty traumatic past background, and so he stayed with his mom pretty much from then on. But another way to deal with anxiety is in that playtime, you ask them what activity kind of looks appealing to them. You want to play with Legos? It's like, oh yeah, I like Legos. And then you and some other kids sit down with them and just join them in that preferred activity. And bonding will decrease anxiety. If a child bonds with you, is involved in a preferred activity, and bonds with some friends, that anxiety is going to drop way down. The other thing is ADHD. The rate of ADHD is very high in our nation. Some people don't believe that there is ADHD. There is. Sorry. It's a real thing. I work with kids with ADHD a lot. Now, can some of it be helped by their environment? Yes. Yes, definitely. Maybe if my son wasn't parented. So this is tricky. There's some kids, it's medical. There's legit some medical things in the brain that some medicine will help. Okay, it is a medical thing. There's some things that it's the nurturing, the environment. Put together, that child can definitely overcome ADHD hurdles that they have in front of them. And so, it's a tricky thing. It's a tricky thing and a touchy issue. But that's okay. We're going to touch it. So it affects millions of children, and the symptoms may appear, it appears different in different children. Some may fail to pay close attention to details, has trouble staying focused on tasks or in play, appears not to listen even when spoken to directly, has difficulty following through on instructions and fails to finish schoolwork or chores, and easily distracted. So that's just some of the symptoms of ADHD. And there's different ways to accommodate for those symptoms. one thing I highly recommend is, and we're going to be talking about this here in a little bit. Wait a minute. Did I pass a page? No, I didn't. Sorry. 1 second. Oh, no, I'm thinking of something that I'm going to teach on and how to be an engaging teacher. That's why. That's later. We are going to talk about this concept, though, later, is changing the activities every 20 minutes max. So to expect a child that's 6 years old with ADHD to sit through a 45-minute presentation like this, completely unreasonable expectation, right? Very unreasonable. So if you're trying to get them to sit through a 45-minute lecture by you, his Sunday school teacher, yeah, it's just not going to happen. Like, no matter what you do, it's just not going to happen. You can give them all the tokens in the world, it's not going to happen. You have to change up the activity, right? So that goes into our planning. So I say, really, in children's church, we don't do anything longer than 20 minutes. Even in my school, I'm changing up what activity we're doing every 20 minutes. And so that's like max for children. I think I have, oh yeah, that'll be a slide later on. But so changing up activities, we'll go into that more later. Ask them to look at you before giving instructions. So you just say, all right, look up at me, look me in my eyes, and then you give them an instruction. So if they're not floating around, you're just like, okay, look at me, look at me. Specific praise with tokens is essential to increasing positive behavior in children with ADHD. It's because you are like helping rewire their brain to just increase their awareness of the positive behavior. And so the tokens and the praise really do that a lot, and catching them in the act of the positive behavior is very powerful for children that have ADHD. In other accommodations, you might have to have someone come and sit with them one-on-one. It just sometimes happens. We have a little boy right now in the K4, K5 class, and he's from a background of trauma, and he's in a foster home right now. So his foster mom goes to church with us, and he comes in and he's darting all over, and we're loving but firm. We're like, you just sit here now, you know. But we also recognize, okay, we can't. It's unreasonable to expect him to sit still for longer than 20 minutes, you know. So we change the activities up. But if my wife is teaching that class, I will sit with him and he'll sit next to me, and I'll coach him through that experience, you know. Make sure he gets tokens. Routines and clear expectations for these routines, just like we talked about earlier. You know, you're establishing rules, you're establishing boundaries, you have a clear set routine. Okay, it's playtime. Now it's cleanup time. We've taught them how to clean up. Now it's worship time. You know, it's very clear, here's our expectations. The next thing that you might see is children with Asperger's/autism. Asperger's is a more mild form of autism, and it's usually kids that are verbal. They talk, they're usually quite intelligent, but they have like a social skill set that is missing. Something that they might say things that are like inappropriate, like, hey, what's that, you know, what's that dot on your head? You know, you're like, oh, that's a pimple. Thanks for pointing that out. But it's because, I mean, most very young children like that, but you might, if you start getting like a 10, 11-year-old that does that, then you're like, like, so they'll like point out all odd things, or they'll talk about the same topic. You know, they usually have a topic that they kind of talk about all the time. Like one kiddo I had several years ago, he loved the globe, and so he and I like connected. He liked maps and globes and stuff. I'm like, you're my boy. But that's all he wanted to talk about. It's like I always went back to the globe and the map and stuff, and so they'll have things that they're like super experts on, but yeah, their social skills are a little off. Now, a lot of times, those kids will feel more comfortable with having a visual schedule, and if you can put up the next slide, it should be, this is kind of what a visual schedule looks like in like a normal classroom, like a school classroom, where it's not just words, but actual pictures, and it lists the order of events that are going to happen. In a visual schedule, you don't necessarily have to have time associated with it. Really, it's more about, here's the order of events that are going to occur, and you put pictures with it because it makes it more friendly for our little friends. So they get used to that routine, and you can have them go up to it until they get used to the routine and point to each one and say, okay, what do we do first? Oh, we unpack, and then you show them how to unpack. What's our next thing? Oh, we're going to go pick out lunch. Oh, now it's calendar time, right? And so having a visual schedule is helpful for our little friends that have autism. These kiddos need immediate feedback about how they're handling things socially. So you're like, hey, let's try that again. Like, the way you asked that person, like, to get out of your way was kind of sounded rude. You're just very matter-of-fact and literal with them. You just like, it just sounded rude. Let's try that again, and now we're going to try to sound nice. You're going to say, excuse me, can you move? You know, something like that. Can you move, please? So you try it. Excuse me, can you move, please? You're like, oh, that was very good. So you're very literal. You're very like, here's what I saw that was a negative behavior. That's okay, but let's try that again, and you teach them the positive way to respond. So my model for just working with children is we are training children, right? And we're not just lecturing them. This is what you need to do right, right? You actually are walking them through the steps, and you're coaching them. You're modeling it. You're role-playing with them. And that's my thought of teaching children these skills, when you're teaching them positive skills, is like a coach, but a kind coach, not like the angry coach that we watched earlier, right? A coach tells you the skill, he models the skill, he has you run that skill and practice, he gives you feedback on that skill. No, let's run that route a little bit different this time, right? And he's with you every step of the way as you master that skill. That's the type of parents and teachers that we want to be to these children, because that's the way the Father works with us when in nurturing us, okay? And the last one is, this is common, but it's not visible. It's language disorders. My father-in-law has a severe expressive language. There's two types. There's a receptive language disorder of processing information and intaking it. There's a disconnect between especially verbal information and then receiving that information. And then there's expressive language disorder in trying to process that information in your head and then expressing it. So I have some kids, I have a kiddo in my class right now, he'll come up to me and walk up to my desk and stand there. Yes? Do you need something? And he'll stand there. And I wait. I'm like, think about what you want to say. You know, I'm patient with, think about what you want to say. It's like, can I go to the bathroom? Yes. It just took him a while to process his need and then express it with his words, right? My father-in-law has the same thing where he gets frustrated with himself, and he's like, I can't think of the word right now, you know? And so just think, if you have this need and you're trying to express it, but you can't get the words out or put it right, how frustrating that is, you know? Or you as a teacher give 5 instructions in a row, and the student or the child has problems processing what you just said, and they just sit there. And to you, it looks like disobedience, But to them, they just heard Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 right? And they're like, I didn't understand a word you just said, right? So this is how we help those kiddos. You're going to create visual displays like this and establish routines and make it visual for them. So it cuts out that all the verbal instructions, right? You're going to limit the amount of verbal prompts you give, okay? So it will look like this, using gesturing and demonstration. So you're going to say, get the paper, get a crayon, have a seat, okay? Paper, crayon, seat, right? Instead of, okay, guys, let's get that shepherd paper that we're going to color, which is on the shelf over there, and then head over to the table over here, and you need a red crayon, not a green one, and then you need a blue one too, and then head over to the round table over there and have a seat. Did you hear the difference? Paper, crayon, seat. Right? And so as teachers, we get frustrated because they're like, you're not listening. And they're like, I have no clue what you just said. Right? And so there's like, frustration can rise all around. But if we just realize that, I would say most children, even if the child doesn't have a language disorder, it's just good to get as clear and simple and as concise in our instructions as possible. Just very clear, just like I just said. So, I'm kind of powering through this. This concludes session 2. Question, comments, or rude remarks? Yes. Yes. Oh, that's a very good question. So, you guys know the answer to this. You right away, and I forgot to mention this, you say, this is one of the big rules. I can't believe I didn't write this down. I apologize. If you ask for a token, you don't get a token. I have to catch you. I have to catch you. It doesn't matter if it's fair or not. A story I tell my kids at the beginning of each year, and you can use this one. This is a freebie. It's the story of the fair doctor. Okay? So one day, in a town not so very far away, there was a fair doctor who wanted to treat all his patients fairly. So one patient came in with a migraine headache, and the doctor said, take 2 ibuprofen, go home, and call me in the morning. So the patient did so. Then the next day, someone comes in, and he had just fallen off a bike and broke his leg. And his leg was a little off. And the doctor, though, wanting to be fair, said, here's 2 ibuprofen, go home, call me in the morning. Day 3, in enters the fair doctor's office, a woman, 9 months pregnant, in labor, and he wants to be fair. He wants to treat everyone fairly, so he says, she's screaming and everything, but she's like, he's a fair doctor. So he says, here's, take 2 ibuprofen, go home, see you in the morning. Probably with another being in her arms the next morning, right? So I asked my students, I asked you guys back there, our under 18s, what's up with this doctor? What is he doing wrong? Yeah. He's not treating them according to their needs. Very good, very good. And so I tell that story a lot, and it kind of addresses what you just said, but like I said, that's kind of a freebie because that's good to tell once in a while to kids because they a lot of times kids get wrapped up in this thing of like, well, we need to treat everyone equal. Like, does God treat everyone equal, or does he treat everyone special and uniquely? Special and uniquely. I want to be treated special and unique. I don't want to be treated fairly. So there's that. But yes, we do, I do say from the get-go, if you ask for a token, then you don't get a token. I just have to catch you. Now, of course, sometimes, especially if you're starting out in a behavior that you're trying to train a child in, and if you use this system at home, I would pick one behavior to start on. If you use like a token system, I wouldn't say, all right, I'm going to give you tokens for cleaning your room and eating all your food and, talking nicely to me and blah, blah, blah. I would pick one behavior, right, and you're focused on catching them doing that one behavior. And of course, like if it's cleaning up after dinner or something, they might be like looking at you and they're like making sure you're watching. But you know what? Even if they do that, I'll give them a token. Not all the time, but just because I know that they're looking out for it, I don't intentionally withhold it then. You know what I mean? I'm like, they're aware. It's in their awareness now. And I want to reward that. They're at least aware of what they're supposed to be doing. So heck, I'm going to reward it, It doesn't matter that it's like, oh, they're just doing it to get a token. I'm like, hey, they're aware of it, and that's the next step in progressing towards positive behavior. So I'm all for that. So, yes. Mm-hmm. Sure. So you're thinking of a scenario where there's a child who is better behaved generally, and he's getting more rewarded than the others, or the one that might not be getting it. So what I do is, at that point, I go above and beyond to make sure that I am rewarding and reinforcing the behavior that I'm targeting for my one that's having a little bit of trouble. And I make sure I have tokens in my pocket to catch them. But it is also okay to reward the kiddos that are displaying the positive behavior. That's totally okay. That's encouraging to them, because it's discouraging for kids to, in my line of work, I tend to focus a lot on the kids that have the greatest needs, and a lot of times they're the ones that end up with the good things, and then the kids that are showing positive behavior the whole time are kind of ignored. That's the problem I get myself into sometimes, because I'm so focused on seeing this child's negative behavior change to positive, I accidentally give him too much, and the kids that have been positive too little, then the ones that are acting positive the whole time are like, it pays to like first be bad and then be good. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to put that message across. So yeah, I think it's kind of evaluating yourself. And then if you, at the end of that teaching session, you step back and you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't give any tokens a little bitly because he was sitting there quiet the whole time. I didn't even notice him. Just make up for it. You're like, here's 5. You were awesome the whole time. You know what I mean? Just tip the scales the other way, So that's what I would do. That's what I would do. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Yeah. That's tough. It's tough to get everyone on the same page. I think that when you're because when you're in that situation, you're kind of a team for that child, right? And I would say it's helpful to make sure all teachers in the public schools and yourself and Sunday school teachers, you have side conversations or meetings about the child and say, hey, this is the plan we're using at home. What's working? Let's all do the same thing. Let's say the same language. Let's have the same expectations. And collaboration, I think, is huge, especially for children that have some special needs and special situations. And that's what I do as a special ed teacher is we come together, the parent, the teacher, the administrators, we come together and we say, hey, let's get all on the same page. And what I've seen in my line of work is it's most effective when the same thing is being said at home as it's being said at school, you know, all across those environments for the kids. So communication, I think, is the biggest key for that. So we still got time. Yes. Ooh, that's a toughie. That's a toughie. Well, so there's two things, right? So I talked earlier about we're working on a child from the outside in with boundaries, rules, rewards. And we have to work with them from the heart level out, right? So I would say the answer is twofold. First, you pull them aside and you say, you know, in our classroom, we are kind to each other and we are respectful to each other, right? And you first lay down the expectations and you say, if you want to stay in our classroom and have nice things and prizes and rewards, then you'll have to be kind. So you address their behavior first, right? You from the outside in. And you say, oh man, if it's severe, you can say, if I hear you say that again, there won't be any prizes for you today. Because we only give prizes to people that say kind words. And that's okay. So you address it from the outside in with the boundaries and rewards and consequences. And then you can appeal to them at the heart level, right? And you say, so our friend here, he has some special needs. And sometimes he might act or say things that might be a little bit funny. But we want to be kind and respectful to everyone, right? So first you address the behavior. You say, do you want to take the road to treasure or do you want to take the road to sadness, right? And, you know, if you take the road to sadness, you get 2 tries in our think chair to think about your actions and then you're out, you know? But then you can also address the inner heart as well and say, okay, this is how you treat someone who's acting a little bit different, a little bit special. So I would say you do both those things. So, and I'm sure Kayla would back you up. Any other questions? Very good questions, by the way. Very practical. Good deal. Kayla, do you think I know I'm early schedule-wise. Do you think they're ready for lunch, or should we just kind of like take a break? All right. Okay. We will take a break, and then we will announce when the food is ready here shortly. Excellent.